Hi, sorry about the appalling lighting. I know it's bad. It's a bit later in the day than I'd normally do a video because I have just completed Shakespeare's Planet by Clifford D. Simak, and I really want to review it and then put it down and then walk away. And then I'm done. I'm going to contort myself a bit in this review so that I'm not going to spoil the plot in any way, because I think this isn't a bad book, but if you're going to enjoy it, I think part of what you're going to enjoy is the pace that Simak uses to just roll the events forward and the language. I think that'd have to be mostly what you enjoy this for. That's not a sterling recommendation right there, is it? This isn't a bad book. It's just I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It is deeply, profoundly okay. It's just an alright book. And I've noticed from other people's reviews, some people absolutely love it. Those are the people that like philosophizing in their books. And some people absolutely loathe it. That's not me. But those people generally want events. They want action. And it's not so great for that. So Shakespeare's Planet starts off with a really, really strong science fiction theme. It's a classic science fiction theme too. So we have our main protagonist, Carter Horton, wakes up from a suspended animation. He and 3 others have been sent out by Earth to explore for planets which will be suitable for colonization. The ship they're traveling in has a composite 3-brain gestalt that guides it. And so they've just arrived on a planet. It's the first one in all that time that they've reached that is actually suitable for human life. Most of what happens in this book happens on the planet, and it takes place between Carter Horton, his robot called Nicomedes, and Nicomedes is a completely inconsistent character in my opinion. He's meant to be a robot. He's meant to be a baseline robot. He's no more baseline than C-3PO is baseline. He's opinionated. He knows a lot. He's very versatile. He repeatedly fails to be what we've been told that he is. And also, he is a robot. There's never any doubt. He's not an android. He's not a brain in a can. He's not anything but a robot. And yet, we routinely hear that he's got feelings. There's an alien called Carnivore. Carnivore gets on his nerves. A robot doesn't have nerves, and that's just the most standout problem that I had with Nicomedes. I had other problems with him as a character, as a manifestation, as a plot advancement tactic, but never mind. Anyway, the planet that they're on is Shakespeare's planet. And it is Shakespeare's planet because Shakespeare was a human who used to live there but has recently died. When Carter Horton ship and Nicomedes land and leave... No, sorry, that came out wrong. When the ship lands, with Nicomedes and Carter Horton step out of the ship onto the planet for the first time, they're looking around and it's all beautiful. And it's a bit meh, apparently, but whatever. They are greeted by an alien who comes up. It's described as a bipedal, sounds vaguely mammalian. It's got weird tentacles instead of fingers, but it also speaks English, and that makes sense within the plot. Is an interesting character. Carnivore is actually probably one of the few really bright spots in this book. But Carnivore and Shakespeare are the two intelligences on the planet. They shared the planet for many years. Shakespeare's just recently died. The two of them were neither of them are from there, and they were both trapped there. Now, why they were trapped there is actually one of the really good science fiction notions in Shakespeare's Planet. Ship, which is never given any other name but Ship, and its crew left Earth around about, we think, 2455, more or less. But that Earth that they left is a different Earth to ours here in 2024. There's been major global economic collapse and social restructuring. We hear a little bits about it here and there in Carter's reminiscence of his childhood, etc. Not too many of them. Now, sometime after Ship left, Ship was meant to go out and find these planets suitable for colonization, but without it going back, many colony ships left Earth in all different directions. And then at some point, light speed travel existed, though ship is still traveling below light speed. So though ship has been traveling for a great deal of time, others have hopscotched in front of them. Not a new concept for science fiction. It's been done before. It's perfectly reasonable within classic sci-fi genre. As humanity spread to the stars, they discovered these tunnels, which let them and other species like carnivore travel between worlds. Unfortunately, there's no way to select a destination. You basically go into it and hope for the best, and you end up somewhere. You may never end up back where you started. I'm not sure if anyone ever ends up back where they started or ever back on the same planet they visited before. It's all very nebulous, and it's just random travel, which carnivore is fine with, Shakespeare was fine with, and later we find other characters. There's a female human called Elaine, which eventually joins them. Other travels all get to this planet, but then they're marooned because the tunnel is broken. Most tunnels have 2 panels, and you can choose outgoing, but this one only has incoming. So, with no outward bound travel, Shakespeare and carnivore were marooned there for years and years and years by the sound of it. Other characters start arriving after Ship arrives. I really like the concept of the tunnel. It reminded me a lot of Heinlein's Tunnels Through the Sky. It's one of his juvenilia books. It's two uses tunnels, though the tunnels that Heinlein envisaged were a lot more directional, and you could actually choose where you were going, and sometimes you could come back, though sometimes you got deserted. Anyway, so in Shakespeare's planet, classic sci-fi, there's not a lot of science in this book. Really not. It is mostly philosophy. There is a lot of philosophy. Heaps and heaps of philosophy. Not much science. There's a little argy-bargy early on about travelling at the speed of light, time dilation, alien technology, the tunnels, freezing time, suspended animation, but there's not much. So for the science fiction lover, not so much. There's also not a lot of action either. There's a bit of desultory, aimless, unsystematic exploring, and not a lot of that. And I have to say that as explorers, Carter Horton and his robot and their opinionated, annoying ship are all rubbish. They are absolute garbage. They wouldn't survive their first encounter with an alien planet. Ship does nothing but think about each of its 3 parts and then about their current gestalt configuration. It has zero interest in everything else, and all it does is talk to itself by itself. I can't say that word on YouTube, I think, so I won't say it. But it's not enjoyable. It's very annoying by the end of it because it does the same thing over and over and over again. It's not enlightening. It is philosophical, but philosophy has to have some zing before I'm interested in it, and Ship doesn't do it for me. Carter, our hero, wanders around the world like a wide-eyed kindergarten kid on a day's excursion in the park. He has got 0 smarts. We're told he's a geologist, but he has 0 science. He has no kit for testing anything, no scientific perspective on the world whatsoever. He drinks flowing water without testing it. I wouldn't even do that in Australia in 2024, let alone on a random planet. You don't even know if it's water. He eats stuff from that world all the time, and he doesn't have to. They've got some sort of matter configurator that makes food, but he just eats stuff from the world. with no hint of caution. He shoves his hand into pools of unidentified fluids that he already suspects aren't water, and two other people who've lived there for years tell him are dangerous. Just shoves his hand in there as if it was a pool full of mercury and couldn't do him any harm. And how did shoving their hand in a pool full of mercury work out for the Hatters, hey? Mad, every one of them. Anyway, I could go on about Carter and his complete lack of survivability or complete lack of science, but he does survive all this, nevertheless, in order to philosophize extensively at us about a whole lot of stuff, both through his own words and through Shakespeare's written down. So Shakespeare was marooned on the planet for a long time, and he wrote down a whole lot of philosophical, I'm going to say mostly garbage, in a printed book which he was carrying of the real Shakespeare, the bard Shakespeare's collected works, and he had a pencil and he wrote down the margins, never telling Carnivore anything about what he was writing. Anyway, so it's philosophy, musings, maunderings, and everyone philosophizes about everything ad infinitum. We hear musings about people's pasts, about society structure, personal beliefs, the effects of intelligent species on their environment, which is pollution, is always a bad thing. Can an intelligent species ever coexist with their environment without wrecking it? Well, you know what? Current evidence based on humans suggests not, but I didn't need to have pages and pages about it. Oh, and everyone wants to philosophize about their place in the universe, except Carnivore. Carnivore is the only mildly bearable character in terms of philosophizing. He just doesn't. He's not interested. And honestly, most of the time, neither am I. I read every word of it, except for the last bit. Oh yes, how people become lost to their own sense of identity when they left Earth because they could no longer identify their point of origin, so they didn't know who they were. Why leaving a planet is more dramatic than leaving your birthplace of England to go to Canada, America, South America, Australia, or anywhere else, I don't know, but Shakespeare was certain, and Simak through Shakespeare is certain that you are. Clifford seems fond of the idea that prehistoric humans had a gut feeling that helped them survive their dangerous environment, but which was lost to civilized man. Woman as well, one assumes, but civilized man, as the civilized world is so less dangerous than the pre-industrialized one. That was a right rolling on the floor laughing out loud one for me, but that's for sure. But he seemed to believe it quite firmly. I don't think he's the only person that's believed that over the years, so yeah, anyway, we philosophized about that a fair bit too. Now, I did get bored with the writing at times because it was never so tedious that it made me want to skim read. It was never so tedious that I ever for a second considered not finishing it, but I was not really terribly invested in it for a lot of the time, and I didn't really care what the end result of all this philosophizing because I suspected that there wasn't gonna be any end result, and guess what? I was right, because philosophy never has an end result. So all that life, the universe, everything, oh me, oh my, oh what, it gets tedious. Besides, we already know the answer to life, the universe and everything. It's 42. Done and dusted. Okay, so Simak's musings must have dated more than any other aspect of the book, I'd say, and they are most of the book. Anyone who enjoys philosophical musings seems to have enjoyed it. I didn't. I got a lot of chores done while reading this book because sometimes I could only do 5 pages before the laundry actually seemed more interesting to me than the next 5 pages. That's a bad sign. Oh yes, page 147. I put a bookmark in, my style of bookmark. Simak, through Carter, on page 147, makes one of the most idiotic assertions possible in any genre, not just sci-fi. Where are we? Speak to me, he pleaded. Why don't you speak to me? You can show and tell. Why can't you speak? Blah, blah, blah. You're one life, and I'm another life. By our very natures, we cannot harm one another. I have no wish to harm for one another. Have no wish, But once again, by our very natures we cannot harm one another, have no reason to wish harm for one another. So there is nothing for either of us to fear, because we're so different that we can't harm one another. Oh, Simak, that's darling. But yeah, whatever. Now, about 200 pages before the end, there is this sudden, wild, multi-species, insane burst of action that's actually quite fun. It doesn't last for long. There's no explanation for it. There's no reason for it. There's no conclusion or end note for it. But for a while, stuff's happening, and it's pretty wild. It's pretty weird. It's pretty wonderful. I liked it. At the end of it, Carter and Elaine go back to going perhaps about the entire world. That's wonderful. And more philosophizing. Ship continues its exhaustive and deeply unproductive examination of its own selves. From page 182 to 185, it was more ship nonsense, and I skim read that because I really didn't care about ship repeating itself anymore. I was totally done with it. Simak. Normally he has themes, things that he's examining, things that he's investigating, concepts that he's trying to use science fiction to bring to his reader and his audience. This time, for me, it didn't really work. It was a deeply average book, and if someone came to me and said, of all the Clifford Simaks you've got, and I've got a few up there, you have to give away one book. Once you've given it away, you'll never read it again. I would probably hand over this book without too much misery, and fairly confident that I will never want to read that. I've been confident about that with other books before, and I've deeply regretted giving them away, so I'll hang on to it for a couple of years until I've fully made up my mind. The other thing about it is it's quite a pretty Methuen? I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. Methuen Paperbacks Limited Magnum. It's from 1978 and it's in pretty good condition. Like the internal of the book, the artwork doesn't wow me. It's pretty good. It's not fantastic. No actual relation to what's inside the book, but it's a wraparound, and I like when you've got a wraparound image and the information in a little box. By the way, that information in the little box bears so little resemblance to what's inside the book that, much like the Goodreads description of Shakespeare's Planet, don't bother reading it. It's nonsense. So yeah, don't know what he was doing. This time it's all just word salad with no obvious theme except let's philosophize about absolute everything. Let's do a bit of a Greek play with everyone talking about themselves. There's a bit of philosophy dressing over the word salad. It's actually inside a dish that could have been a really good sci-fi story if we'd have stuck to the science fiction and stayed away from the philosophy and actually put in events that happened to people and stuff. Anyway, one of those deeply meh classic sci-fis. Always sad to encounter one. I'm really sad it's Simak, because Simak often works for me. What I've noticed about Simak is that I read the book, and even if I'm not wowed by the book itself, I'll go away and I'll think about it a lot. So I expect to be thinking about this a little bit for the next few days. I can't see myself seriously changing my overall opinion of the book, though. So onward and outward, on to the next book. May it be slightly less forgettable. And thank you very much for watching. Do the things YouTube likes, the commenting and the subscribing and all that sort of thing, if you feel like it. Or just watch another video. Have a great evening if you're in Australia.